Hey everyone, it is me, Justina, again, and today I'm going to give you a quick overview of what is in store for this week. You have three readings this week. The first is about blockbusting, which is a way in which real estate agents in the 50s, 60s, and sometimes the 70s were using concepts of race and racism to their benefit. It's a really interesting piece of literature that shows how racism affected so many different aspects of life throughout this time period, even something like real estate. I hope you enjoyed. I think it's a really fascinating and unique piece. So you will be doing your sourcing on the blockbusting piece, and then you have two other readings. One is extremely well, both are pretty famous actually readings. One is by Martin Luther King Jr. It's his letter from a Birmingham jail, which is a letter he wrote while actually in jail. He was arrested while protesting, and he wrote this really amazing letter. It's truly one of the most important pieces of American literature, an amazing primary source. He really lays out why he's doing what he's doing and what kind of strategies he's using, and why things do need to change now, because there's a lot of question of we want slow change during Martin Luther King's career and people kind of trying to hold back on change so quickly, and he's saying this is why change needs to happen quickly and needs to happen now. So I hope you enjoy that piece. The last piece, which is your longest reading, one of your longest readings of the semester, is a chapter from the autobiography of Malcolm X. It is the chapter in which he's really becoming a member of the Nation of Islam, and really taking, and a minister, and really recruiting. He was Malcolm X was one of the best recruiters for the Nation of Islam, and he has specific strategies he's using to recruit more people to his religion and towards his movement regarding racial inequalities in America. And as you probably know, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X had very different approaches to how to deal with racial inequalities. So think about that when you're reading both pieces. How is it different? Why is it interesting that both exist? Why is it important that both existed? Maybe did one help out the other, or vice versa? You will actually use those two readings, the Martin Luther King reading and the Malcolm X reading, to do your assessment this week. This week, your assessment will be a short paper. As we've been working, you've found examples, right? You've written a thesis and supported with examples, and now you're going to use both of those skills that you've been working on the last couple weeks, and you're going to add the skill of analysis. So now you're going to write a paper, a very short paper that just has a thesis at the top, so no introductory or concluding paragraphs. You just need to write a two-pronged thesis. So if you don't remember how to write a thesis with multiple prongs, please go back and watch the video I gave you last week. So you're going to write a two-pronged thesis, and then you're going to write two body paragraphs. And I'm very specific in the way that I want you to structure your paragraphs, because writing for history can be different than writing for other disciplines. And so I hope to provide you with structure so that you understand how historians write. And I have a very simplistic way of kind of laying out an argument, finding supporting evidence, and then analyzing it. And if you notice, you can see my rubric. You get points for doing every single thing on those lists. So please pay attention to that. And also the fact that on the rubric, you will see that the analysis gets the most amount of points. So that's the thing I want you to be working on the most this week. So when you're structuring your paper, you're going to have your body paragraphs. You're going to have an introduction sentence that shows the theme in which you're going to be exploring in that particular paragraph, and then you'll have two separate examples with each having their own corresponding analysis. And when you think about analysis, you're thinking about how your evidence is proving your thesis, right? So you choose an example, and then the analysis is your words explaining why that is your chosen example is supporting your argument in your thesis, okay? So please, if you have any questions about the structure, please feel free to email me. You will also be writing, like I said, your own thesis, and the prompt is really, you're going to use Martin Luther King's and Malcolm X's primary sources to write your thesis, and you can look at the different ways that they're approaching the civil rights movement and racial inequality. So I kind of want to leave it open-ended. It's kind of a very broad prompt to allow you to kind of write what you want to talk about. I want to give you the ability to write what's interesting to you. Last thing, so Malcolm X's piece is called The Autobiography of Malcolm X, and I want to point this out, but it's called The Autobiography of Malcolm X, written by Alex Haley. So I want to kind of explain to you what that means, because that's confusing, because autobiographies are written by the person that they're talking about, right? So essentially, you would think an autobiography of Malcolm X was written by Malcolm X. But Alex Haley, who was also the author of Roots, a very famous book and miniseries about slavery in the U.S., he did a series of interviews. He initially did a series of interviews with different members of the Nation of Islam about in the early 60s. It was for an article that was published in Playboy, I want to say 62 or 63. So at that time he was interviewing the leader, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who was the leader of the Nation of Islam, as well as other members, including Malcolm X. He was very fascinated by Malcolm X, and he wanted to continue to do interviews with him, to do a longer piece on him. Well, interestingly enough, he started to do these interviews just when Malcolm X's relationship with the Nation of Islam deteriorated, and he chose to leave the Nation of Islam and become, he took a pilgrimage to Mecca, and became a more traditional member of, a more traditional Muslim. So during this time, Alex Haley continued to do these interviews with Malcolm X, and when Malcolm X was assassinated in February 21st, 1965, he chose to quickly finish up the book and publish it very shortly after Malcolm X died. So while it is called the autobiography, the question of whether it's an autobiography or not is really important, because it's really written by Alex Haley, who did, had Malcolm X's interviews as his primary sources, but was through the lens of his writing. So it's a really interesting primary source to work with, because you have to think about what was Malcolm X highlighting in his interviews, but also what did Alex Haley feel was the most important aspects of Malcolm's life to include, or did he maybe exaggerate on certain things? It's a complicated piece of literature, that is for sure. But I encourage you to kind of think about those complex aspects of it, because I think it makes it more interesting to think about how is Alex Haley's voice incorporated throughout the piece, as well as Malcolm X's. So I encourage you to think about it through that lens. And also, if you have any other questions about any of this, please feel free to email me about the paper or just about the history. And I hope you enjoy these two pieces. They're both really, really excellent, and I like them both very much, unsurprisingly. So yes, I hope you have a great week. I hope you had a nice 4th of July, and if you have any questions, feel free to email me. All right, bye-bye.